about this video of Keenan Cornelius talking about, he was showing some newspaper clips of a guy in the 1910s that was calling his style American Jiu-Jitsu.
Seems to be some confusion about American Jiu-Jitsu versus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so I'm just going to clear all that up in today's video. We're going to be looking at this guy. Remember this face. Super quick history lesson. Let's just hop on over to the Library of Congress and do a quick search through the history of all American newspapers for the words Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Oh, that's interesting. There's 0 results. What's that about? But if we search American Jiu-Jitsu, we see this right here. And this right here. And this right here. But this is 1926. Let's see if there's anything earlier. Okay, here's one. American Jiu-Jitsu, 1914. But wait a second. Helio Gracie was born in 1913. And he didn't start learning Jiu-Jitsu from the Japanese ambassadors until he was 16 years old. That means American Jiu-Jitsu predates Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or whatever form of it existed by at least 15 years. But wait, American Jiu-Jitsu, this is from 1910. Okay, there's hundreds of these, but here's another one, Americanized Jiu-Jitsu. This one's from 1913. Okay, pause the video on this one and tell me if this sounds a little bit familiar. Okay, here's some literature I've collected from over the years. We have American Jiu-Jitsu, we have American Police Jiu-Jitsu, more American Police Jiu-Jitsu, more American Jiu-Jitsu.
And I'm not sure if Keenan is claiming to be a representative of that lineage. I don't know if he's saying that there is a lineage of American Jiu-Jitsu, or is he just trying to say that just like there was an American long time ago who branded American Jiu-Jitsu, he can do exactly the same thing. What do you think about this?
Well, first, I mean, I saw the video. Someone sent it to me. First of all, I mean, I like Keenan. I've spent time with him before. He's a nice guy. I think he's got a great jiu-jitsu career. He is a good businessman, but it's the connection he's trying to create here, the genealogy he's trying to create is non-existent, and it's wrong on so many different fronts. You know, I think first of all he's doing the same thing Len Lanius did, which was appeal to American patriotism to gain followers. So if you put a flag in front of your business and it says, "Oh, that guy's a patriot. I'm a patriot. I'm going to buy from him." You know, if you put the word American in front of jiu-jitsu, that makes me a patriot. I want to be around patriots too, you know, because patriotism is a big part of the American psyche. You know, Americans are very aware of their history. So when they see a flag or the word American, they immediately think, "Oh, these are my people." There's nothing to do with patriotism. I mean, you can put a flag on your car and you can, you know, sing the national anthem everywhere you go. It doesn't make you a patriot. Patriotism is something else. Let's not insult real patriots, right? But I think it's just it's an easy way to gain followers without actually having to be a patriot or a great businessman or a great coach or I mean, you don't have to achieve a high standard to quickly gain followers, right? It's just a very cheap way of gaining followers. And I'm not attacking Keenan. I like him. I think the position I am attacking, the position I think it's fair that I attack it, because it's when you actually have that book, the Len Lanius book. And it's interesting that if you watch the video, Keenan's like, pay attention at this face, like trying to draw like the equivalent of a Carlos Helio connection to American Jiu-Jitsu. This is the father of American Jiu-Jitsu. What's interesting is he doesn't show the rest of the pictures. There's a number of pictures there of him showing moves. And there's a reason why Keenan didn't show them, because it's not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's not what we call Jiu-Jitsu. See, the term Jiu-Jitsu in the 1920s, 30s, early 19th century, is a very eclectic term. This is before the term Judo took over. So everything that was coming out of Japan was called Jiu-Jitsu. Jiu-Jitsu was the equivalent of the term martial art today. The way we use the term martial art, people were using Jiu-Jitsu early in the 20th century. It was a very broad term. It didn't just mean Judo. It meant more than Judo. But Judo became the dominant force or the dominant brand of Jiu-Jitsu, so to speak. So basically any kind of self-defense and self-defense was the orientation. It wasn't competition or MMA. They were really selling it as self-defense. So if you look at what Len Lanius, the father of American Jiu-Jitsu in quotation marks, was doing, it looks more like Aikido than Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It looks more like Aikido than, like grappling. It doesn't look like catch wrestling. It doesn't look like judo. It doesn't look like wrestling. It doesn't look like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It doesn't look like Sambo. It looks like nothing. I mean, these arts I just mentioned are much closer to what we do. What Len Lanius was doing is, I mean, it looks like, self-defense / Aikido, wrist bending, standing techniques. I think the vast majority of them completely ineffective and non-tried. They've never been tried. So it's not an empirical style. He's not wearing a gi. There's certainly no lapel guards in his style, So when you take closer analysis, what you see there's no connection other than the word. And the word jiu-jitsu is so problematic. I discussed this at length in my second book, because it's a term with no fixed definition. It's meant something different. Every generation, it means something completely different. I was able to witness in my own life, the term jiu-jitsu when I started in 98. That's when I started training. And today, the term jiu-jitsu has changed dramatically in cultural terms, in technical terms. Like the culture of the art has changed completely. Like it's very business oriented in a way that it wasn't when I started training, right? So there's a number of things. I mean, and not only that, if you wanted to really draw a lineage, you would have to do it through a lot more data. Like you would have to back it. That's an extraordinary claim, saying that there's a link between what some gyms in the U.S. are doing today and this guy. And this guy, to my knowledge, left no lineages. We don't know his methodology, right? We don't know his technical canon other than what's in that book, which is, again, closer to Aikido and self-defense than what it is to what we call jiu-jitsu today, right? I don't even like the term jiu-jitsu is so broad, man. It's hard to use it because it means you have to say jiu-jitsu when and where. You got to give it time and space to give it some meaning, because if you just say jiu-jitsu, jiu-jitsu, what do you mean jiu-jitsu? What is it? What does it even mean? It's something different everything, like all the time. So I think it's just a way of like gaining followers. Like there's no substance to the claim. Typically I define a martial art in technical terms, methodological terms, and cultural / philosophical terms, right? We see this in judo, has a very specific philosophy. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu doesn't have a philosophy. It has a culture that is ever changing. In methodological terms, it's also changing. In technical terms, it's more or less fixed by the rule sets, which are different, but are not so different to really create a whole new brand of anything, right, in technical terms. But what Len Lanius was doing was, in methodological terms, we don't know. In cultural philosophical terms, it's not defined in the book. It's very brief. It's almost like it's more of a pamphlet than a book, really. It's very short. It's not special. There's a reason why I didn't show you the rest of the content of the book. And but the term American does appeal to people who confuse it with patriotism.
Right. Okay. So it's clear that this Len Lanius guy didn't leave a lineage. We cannot talk about a lineage of American Jiu-Jitsu. Do new grapplers in the US have a case of saying there's been a lot of modifications made in America after they adapt the style from Brazil? So now we can call it American Jiu-Jitsu.
I mean, you can call it Mexican Jiu-Jitsu too. You can call it Canadian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, you can. It's a free country. No one's going to stop you. You can just call it like, Robert Drysdale Jiu-Jitsu. You can call it Marco Moreno Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, you can call it anything you want. Does it have substance? I don't think so, because I addressed this in my new book. There's a whole chapter about it. I think it's just a weak argumentation. At the end of the day, when you look closely, you have to appeal to an audience that doesn't know its history, that doesn't know anything about jiu-jitsu. It's an attack on. It's a marketing plot for white belts, really. What's new about jiu-jitsu in the U.S.? Let's look at it. Like technical terms. All right. Oh, there's some developments with footlocks. Okay, so what are we claiming it is different because it has new techniques? Well, that's always been the norm. Jiu-jitsu has always been evolving. There's never been a moment where there wasn't a new development in jiu-jitsu. When I started training, if you knew half guard, you were a gangster. If you knew open guard in 98, you knew some spider guard sweeps, you were a gangster. like all the innovation. But you didn't see Brazilians saying, Brazilians never claimed that jiu-jitsu was theirs. Now there's something, because of the American jiu-jitsu, you see people saying that, but there was no concept of like, oh, this is Brazilian, not Japanese, or we modified jiu-jitsu for the world. There was none of that. People don't even think that way. That's kind of a new thing because people get petty about, their misunderstandings of, their nationalism. But it's something fairly new. But I mean, Brazilians have always led innovation, but they never claimed it was theirs because of those innovations. I mean, innovation's still going on in Brazil and Canada and Mexico and Australia. Innovation's going on everywhere. It's not exclusive to any country. What's exclusive to the U.S. in many regards is that Americans are exceptional at marketing and promotion. And then it sounds like they're doing something new. Like I said, I was telling you earlier, I have pictures of these guys exchanging blows in an MMA match in the 1950s, 60s from 50-50, attacking heel hooks. There's nothing new about heel hooks. I interviewed Euclides Pereira, which, in the pre-Royce Gracie era, was next to Ivan Gomes and Carlson Gracie, the greatest MMA fighter in Brazil. Like these guys were, I mean, you can't compare them to fighter today's because it's like a whole new level of toughness. We're talking about people fighting every other weekend for very little money, like, no commission, no gloves. Like that was as real as it gets. And this guy's in his 90s, right? And I had the privilege of interviewing him the other day. And I'm asking about the heel hook because everyone's asking the origin of the heel hook. Where does it come from? And he goes, "What do you mean?" It was such a dumb question to him. I almost like I was embarrassed to ask it because he's going like, "We always knew it." And I'm like, "Well, but who taught you?" He said, "My coach." And then he goes, "Well, who did your coach learn it from?" His coach? Like he was asking me like it was such a dumb question, like what's the origin of the armbar or the kimura? Like he couldn't even believe it. I was like, it was nonsensical to him because, it's to him a standard that if you grab someone's heel and you twist it, someone's going to tap. It's just human anatomy. There's nothing new about these things. But people are under the impression that this is something new. Now, have the techniques evolved and developed? Yes, absolutely. But that standard of practice has nothing to do with geography, please, people. That just has to do with you throw a bunch of animals in the room, they're trying to kill each other. They're going to come up with new ways of killing each other. There's nothing new about it, but it's a marketing ploy to try to say we do something different. And in fact, that people are saying that trace their lineage straight back to Brazil. Now, there is an argument that can be made for American Jiu-Jitsu. And I have a chapter about this in my book. It's called The Americanization of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu by Brazilians, because I argue that Brazilians did it, not Americans. And it's the commercialization of jiu-jitsu, turning jiu-jitsu into a big business. And it's not something that it changed dramatically, cultural terms, from on its way from Brazil to here. Like no one looked at jiu-jitsu as a business in Brazil. It was just not, because there's no money to be made. So people didn't look at it as a business. They look at it as almost like a quasi-religion. We had one of our interviewees in the book, and he described it as a cult. Jiu-jitsu to us was a cult, his word. And when he said it, I'm like, it's exactly what I wanted to hear because that's what it reads to me. These guys were like almost like missionaries for a cause. And then they came to the U.S. and they saw big bucks and they go, oh, we need to repackage jiu-jitsu. And they repackaged the whole thing. And it was a process of making it, consumer friendly. And it wasn't consumer friendly in Brazil. It was a practice for Spartans. Like if you were... You didn't get to complain to the coach if you didn't like something. You're not a customer. You're a student. Shut up. There was a hierarchy that was very military and very strict. And it changes dramatically when it comes to the U.S. where really the student is in charge. Coaches don't admit this, but anyone who's a business owner knows that the customer is the one who's in charge because they determine where your business is going, right? So what happens, there's been a process of turning jiu-jitsu into, I think Pedreira calls it the taekwondoization of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I think there's something to be said about that. In that regard, it has become American, but it wasn't done by Americans. It was, done by Brazilians. So much so, this commercialization is so interesting to me because Americans don't notice it because they take it for granted that martial arts are commercial. They take it for granted. It's the norm. It's what they're used to. Americans are always, this is what they know. So, when Brazilians changed it here, Americans didn't even notice anything had changed because they had never seen the previous version of jiu-jitsu, right? When it held completely different values that were of tough love, values of respect, loyalty. Man, loyalty was huge back in the day. Huge. Self-promotion was an embarrassment. Now you see Brazilians do it. But when I was training, like self-promotion was like, if you did that, people look at you, you scumbag. Like get out of people. I'm not going to mention names, but we had high-level names who started with this self-promotion thing in the early 2000s, and they were trying to join the team. Guys that were like top 3 in the world at the time. that would try to join the team, and we didn't let them. We didn't let him because he was he was sort of like the Conor McGregor of jiu-jitsu at the time. He was starting with the shit talking. This is in 2004, right? And we didn't want him on the team. It was like, nah, we don't want you. We don't like the way you talk. We don't like your arrogance. We don't like your self-promotion. So we wouldn't accept him on the team. That's not today. Like, they're recruiting. It's the opposite. No one's asking if the guy is upholding values that are congruent with the core of jiu-jitsu values that made jiu-jitsu popular. People just go, can you make me money? Can you make my team popular? Come over here. I'll give you a place to sleep. I'll give you food. I'll give you free training. I'll get you sponsors. They're recruiting fighters from other teams. That's unthinkable in the 90s. That is unthinkable. So it's changed dramatically. So in that way, it has become a business, which is to say, Americanized. Like, business is a big component of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu today. And in some ways, it's good. I make a living from it. I'm not so much criticizing it as much as I am analyzing and trying to perhaps explain it to people that did not witness the change.